I woke up to a buzzing phone, the screen lighting up my dark bedroom with a flood of missed calls and messages from my cousin, Mia. The first one stopped me cold. "Turn on the news, now." I rubbed my eyes and fumbled for the remote. Every local channel had dropped their usual morning chatter. Instead, the same shaky helicopter footage filled the screen. A small town, sitting in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by untouched forest. The problem? The news anchors kept repeating the same phrase: "It wasn't here yesterday." Officials claimed there was no record of construction, no satellite images, no maps showing any settlement in that location. It had appeared overnight, as if conjured out of thin air. I almost laughed until my gaze locked on something in the footage. At first, I thought they were statues. A shopkeeper mid-wave, a man tying his shoe, a child holding a ball. But their skin looked too real. They stood frozen in uncanny, half-completed gestures, their heads tilted slightly, eyes glazed yet open. Another message from Mia flashed on my screen. "It's only 30 minutes from us. I'm picking you up." When she arrived, her hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual. Her voice carried that dangerous curiosity we used to share as kids, the kind that got us into trouble. "We go in, we look, we leave," she said. But the way she said it, I knew she didn't believe her own words. The drive was supposed to be simple. But halfway there, GPS stopped updating, spinning endlessly. The road narrowed, trees pressing in close on either side, their branches arching overhead until the sunlight dimmed like twilight had arrived too early. Then, the sign emerged out of the shadows. "Welcome to Harrow's End." It looked brand new. Wood-polished, letters freshly painted, yet beyond it, the buildings stood weathered and old, like relics from a century ago. Storefronts leaned slightly, roofs sagged, and the cobblestone street looked worn from decades of footsteps. The smell of burning wood hung in the air, faint but constant, though no smoke curled from the chimneys. We stepped out of the car. The air was unnaturally still. No birds, no insects, no wind. And then we saw them. The frozen townspeople. Up close, they were even more disturbing. Their skin was warm, their chests rose and fell with breath, but their eyes, glassy and unblinking. The man tying his shoe looked as if he'd been crouched there for hours without the slightest twitch of muscle. Mia's voice was barely a whisper. "They're alive." And then, the child with the ball turned his head in one slow, creaking motion and smiled at us. We stumbled backward, our shoes scraping against the cobblestones. The smile didn't fade. The child's eyes tracked us, even as his body stayed locked in place. We turned and hurried down the street. That's when I noticed something wrong. Horribly wrong. Our shadows weren't following us. They stayed in place, stretched in the direction we'd first entered the town. The buildings around us all felt wrong too. Every door we tried was unlocked, but inside, the spaces didn't make sense. The grocery store's shelves were lined entirely with unmarked tin cans, each one identical, stacked to the ceiling. The diner's laminated menu listed dishes I'd never heard of: ashroot pie, bone tea, 7-day stew. In the diner, Mia found a door leading to a staircase. We followed it down into a basement that smelled faintly of damp earth and something metallic. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched out, its walls lined entirely with mirrors. But our reflections weren't ours. The glass showed people we didn't know. Dozens of them, pounding on the inside of the mirrors, their mouths moving in silent screams. Then, one by one, they stopped, turned, and all at once, every reflection stared straight at me. One woman in the glass pressed her lips to the surface and whispered something I felt rather than heard. My name. We burst out of the diner's basement, lungs burning, legs shaky from the sprint. The sunlight, or what passed for sunlight here, felt weaker than before, almost like it had been filtered through dirty water. My eyes struggled to adjust. That's when I froze. Our car was gone, not stolen, simply gone. In its place was an unfamiliar building, a crumbling post office that hadn't been there when we arrived. The cobblestone street now stretched in both directions, but it didn't lead out of town anymore. Instead, both ends vanished into a shifting haze, like heat mirages, except colder. Mia's breath hitched. "The streets," she whispered. I followed her gaze. Buildings weren't static. They pulsed. No, shifted. Their walls sliding, windows changing shape, whole storefronts vanishing and reappearing as if the town itself was rearranging to trap us. And then I saw movement. The frozen townspeople were no longer frozen. They moved now, but not naturally. Their bodies floated forward without bending knees or flexing ankles. Their heads tilted at unnatural angles, eyes locked on us like predators who had been waiting for the right moment to pounce. The man who'd been tying his shoe earlier was now upright, arms hanging limply at his sides, gliding across the street toward us. The child with the ball dragged it along the ground without moving his arm. The ball just scraped forward on its own, leaving faint marks in the stone. We turned and ran, the sound of our footsteps swallowed almost instantly by the thick air. We ducked into an alley and nearly screamed. It wasn't an alley anymore. It was a corridor lined with tall, cracked mirrors, each one reflecting us, but wrong. In the reflections, our skin was pale and paper-thin, our eyes dark pits. The reflections didn't copy our movements. They stayed still, tilting their heads slowly in unison as we passed. The pressure in my skull grew worse, a deep ache like my brain was swelling. Whispered voices drifted from somewhere far away, overlapping and indistinct. We pushed through a warped wooden door at the end of the alley and stumbled into a dim tailor shop. The smell of dust, mildew, and something sweet, almost rotten, clung to the air. Coats and dresses hung from the ceiling like limp bodies, their sleeves swaying gently, though the air was perfectly still. And then from between the hanging clothes, a voice spoke, soft, clear, and far too close. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice was everywhere, above us, behind us, inside us. It didn't echo like normal sound. It vibrated in my skull, each word scraping across my nerves like glass on bone. Mia grabbed my wrist. "We're leaving, now!" She pulled me toward the shop's back door. It opened into a tiny office with a single desk, dust-coated and warped from age. On it sat an open ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle. The ink was dark, the handwriting elegant but unfamiliar. At the top of the current page, a heading read in perfect calligraphy: "New Arrivals." Beneath it, dozens of names were neatly listed in chronological order. Some had dates next to them. Most did not. My gaze slid down the list and my stomach twisted violently when I saw the final two entries. Mia Holloway, Evan Clark. We hadn't signed anything. We hadn't given our names to anyone, but the ink was fresh. Mia slammed the book shut, her face pale. "We have to find a way out." We pushed back into the street and stopped dead. The town was gone. In its place stood a labyrinth of mirrors, stretching as far as I could see in every direction. Tall, narrow, warped mirrors, some cracked, some perfectly polished. In each one, our reflections didn't move as we did. They stood still, watching, smiling faintly. Some were closer to the glass than they should have been, their faces almost pressed to the surface. Others stood far back in impossible, endless rooms behind the reflection. A faint tapping started somewhere deep in the maze. Slow, deliberate, the sound of something hard striking stone. Tap, tap, tap. We backed away, the mirrors closing in. The tapping grew louder, faster. My reflection tilted its head at me, then stepped forward, closer, until its face filled the glass. Without warning, it raised its hand and pressed it to the mirror. The surface rippled like water. Cold fingers wrapped around my wrist from the other side, their grip icy and strong. I screamed, pulling back, but the glass pulled harder. My arm sank through the surface, the cold spreading up to my shoulder, into my chest. Mia grabbed me, shouting my name, but her voice was already muffled, fading, as if I was sinking underwater. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was Mia's face, pale with horror, framed in silver. She reached for me, But in the reflection beside her, she was already smiling.